for just so that you hear it. Yes. So I want to, just first of all say thank you for opening your arms and inviting us to your family here at Ecpat, Turkey, right? And return the favor and make you feel part a little bit of the global family of Ecpat International, right? So that amazing experience and the diversity and all the rest of it that is comprised here in this room and that exists in Turkey in the child protection community, exists in other countries also, and they are all your friends, your brothers, your sisters, your fathers and daughters in the child protection family in the world, and you're part of it, right? And so we at Ecpat International have been, well, first of all, 123 organizations, 103 countries. We just had to disaffiliate someone. But so you see that Turkey is right in the middle of it, and that when you see any of those flags, it's not one individual, it's not one or two or three people, it's an organization in many aspects, in many countries. It's a network, like you are a network. And I really believe that's where success comes from, is that we bring the people together, and not only, very often, to bring people together that are not like us. I think I heard it from someone was here, said like it's from the private sector. I do think the lawyers play a really, really critical role. All kinds of businesses, law enforcement plays a role. Financial institutions play a role, right? Transport and travel industry plays a role. Prosecutors play a role. Children themselves play a role. We at Ecpat, I think one of the key things we can do is convene. We bring people together and have those conversations, and also across the different disciplines, so that we don't only talk to ourselves, right? Because really we need to bring people along with us. And that's where the biggest learning is taking place. I've just come back from another similar meeting that we organized in Nairobi, actually. And it was such a strong kind of moment when the prosecutors spoke. The prosecutors who really kind of prosecute cases of child sexual abuse. And they say, you know, our laws are not appropriate. Our judges, they sometimes speak very, very inappropriate to the victims when they're in court. Our courtrooms are not child friendly and all this stuff, so that if these people start speaking what we experience and what we see, that's so much stronger than when we always say it, right? So we need to create this group of allies that help us and that can transform a system from within. Law enforcement, I mentioned it, is such a critical partner, because it's a very secretive business. Law enforcement is very, they don't usually come forward and say, oh, we have these and these problems, and this is not going well. It's always all going well and everything under control, right? But when they start talking inside, we need this, this is not working well, then it's much more accepted than when we come from the outside and we perceive as bringing criticism or whatever, right? So I think that's a unique role that we can play. Convene people, bring the right people around the table. Now, so that is happening. 123 organizations in 103 countries. And we started next, well, and maybe I say also, well, the diversity that you see in this room is really reflective of how Ecpat is. There's not one member like the other, right? So you have those who provide services to children directly. You have survivor-led organizations in our network. You have advocates and campaigners that don't see a child in their work, apart from maybe at home, their own children, but they see politicians, they see policymakers and so on. You know, you have research organizations, you have the campaigners and the activists, and so not one organization is like the other, but what unites them is the joint vision to work on ending sexual exploitation of children, right? And so that's kind of the red thread. That's what we are looking for. It doesn't matter what your profession is. If you work towards ending the sexual exploitation of children, you should be part of Ecpat. That's how we look at it. Now, are you going fast or forward or backward? I don't know. So that one, yeah. All right. So I think what we do in a nutshell is, and maybe we touch upon it a little bit in the next 2 days, is really, for Ecpat, often it starts with a piece of research, right? So we strongly believe that we can only talk about solutions if we have understood the problem in the first place. We don't do children a service, a good service, even if it comes from a good place, to propose solutions that when we haven't understood the problem properly. And so we often start with research, and then we make that knowledge available to people who can change the world. So like, you should know this, have you read that? We involve people in research very often, because we think it shouldn't be a piece of Ecpat research, then it's our problem. We bring a problem and it's our research and so on. But if you involve people in research, if you make them part of a research project, you involve them in terms of focus group discussions, whatever it might be, interviews, surveys, you ask them, say like, is that what you told us? Are you comfortable with that? They can feedback. So once you come out and launch a piece of research, it's not your own anymore. It's co-owned. Now it's all of ours. We don't care if our logo is on it. Actually, often we don't put, say like, to the ministry, you want to put your logo on? Go for it, right? So then the ownership is really, really important, because people agree with you. Everyone wants, there's not much pushback often on the research, but the ownership is important, right? So for people to actually feel compelled to do something. Yeah, and then we bring the knowledge to people, we raise awareness, we do advocacy, we do campaigning, we want to change laws and policies, and then do again research. Did this piece of policy or law actually change anything in the life of a child? Because often it doesn't, right? Countries come forward and say, we have this law and that law, and yay, but the child doesn't know that, and it's not implemented anyway. So it looks good on paper. So then we have to go back and say, oh, there's a new law. What has changed? Nothing. How come? Right? So there's a constant monitoring and advocacy and awareness raising cycle that we are engaged in at Ecpat International. Next one. So, and what we're looking for, apart from obviously, I mean, every child that receives a service that is taken care of, that is doing better than before after our interventions, is a good result and outcome. What we are looking for at Ecpat International, though, is not the individual child so much. It's really about what can we do with the information from what has gone wrong, or with the information of what has gone well. We shouldn't only kind of look at the negative. Always, there's many good things happening, and we should kind of promote that. But really, that we look for systemic change and say we see that things are going wrong. So what change need to take place on a systemic level so that doesn't happen anymore, right? So that is broader, big ticket impact what we're looking for, and that we can only achieve together, really. And then societal change, because we heard it, that very often it's not acknowledged that the problem is there, it's normalized, it's put under the carpet, you know, it's not addressed, let's not speak about it. We encourage victims not to speak about it. And we talk pressure that doesn't help. It's just making things worse. Right? And that's maybe the hardest part. That's really the hardest part, because that often is between the law and the implementation. If you have the law, but the police officer is like, doesn't help. So here we are. That is Ecpat. And now we started in 1990, right? And the ambition then was really to put the topic on the table, say that we need to speak about this. At that time, people knew that things are happening to children, but it wasn't an agenda item on political agendas. It wasn't a priority anywhere. So in 1990, our founder, Ron O'Grady, was a gentleman from New Zealand, and he supported, through his engagement with the church in New Zealand, projects in the north of Thailand, where there was there were communities that were impoverished, there were lots of things were lacking. So he went there regularly and helped the communities there. And when he was there, he realized often that very young girls came and they kind of held his hand, and the parents were there and pushed them towards him and so on and so forth. And he thought, like, they're also nice, until he realized that actually what's happening was that they offered their kids to him in return for money. And so he was honestly shocked and said, like, oh God, what's happening here, right? And he brought organizations together in 1990 and said, like, we need to address this. Who's working on that? He did the mapping and so on, and brought people together. And in 1990, around about 25 Ecpat members came together to start, or organizations came together to found Ecpat International. And then, as we grew more global and stronger in numbers, the key intervention that we worked on from a kind of advocacy campaigning point of view were the global congresses on sexual exploitation, right? And the Swedish royal family, Queen Sylvia, was very much involved in kind of creating the first political momentum, and she organized the first global congress in 1996 in Stockholm, in Sweden. And then she used her royal connections and pulled in the Japanese royal family, and we did the second global congress in Yokohama in 2001. And then, because she's the Swedish queen, but she's half German and half Brazilian. That's a career path, isn't it? Amazing. So, and then she used her Brazilian connections and organized the third global congress in 2008 in Rio. Ever since, we did not organize a global congress anymore, first because we thought, well, we shouldn't now anymore push that this needs to be a topic. People understand it, it's a topic, there was laws and policies followed, so it was possible to speak about it in the international political arena. And so we should ask for more specific and get more into the weeds of the problem, not only ask for acknowledgement of the problem, right? So that was the one reason. The other reason was that in 2015, the Sustainable Development Goals came around. We pushed very hard to get something into the SDG framework, and now obviously we have our 16.2 target, and that calls for an end to all violence against children, and there's a number of explicit and implicit targets within the SDG framework that relate to different areas of child sexual exploitation. So we thought, let's push collectively for a good implementation of the SDGs, and maybe not organize another global congress. Well, we might organize another one at a certain point, but not at the moment. So that was part of the history. I don't know, was any one of you at any one of these events? Hands up. Who was? No?
People are too young here,
So I wasn't there either, don't worry. But yeah, that's part of our history. I think we should be aware of it. We should be saying like, okay, when you go out and speak about Ecpat, that's where we come from. That's what is a shared identity. Now, the office is in Bangkok because we were founded in Thailand. And maybe a word to Thailand still. I think what happened there, and I mentioned it before, so people have the perception of Thailand having this problem, particularly, and especially when it comes to tourism, right? But where it came from was the Vietnam War, right? So there are soldiers over there in that region. Thailand was not a war party, but the American soldiers that were in Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam. When they had a weekend off, they went to Thailand to relax and have a good time. And in that context, a thriving sex industry established there, right? And really, I mean, there wasn't big awareness culturally or globally at that time that 15, 16, 17, who cares, you know, about the age. So it was, anyway, so that's how this industry established. The war ended, the soldiers went home, but the industry was there, and so now it has been gradually taken over by tourists from around the world that come with hard dollars that can. What we see is that when people, usually, not usually, but often, when they engage in abuse and exploitation of children, they maybe don't do this right in their own communities where everyone knows them, but when they leave their house, when they leave their country, when they leave their region, their community, when they're somewhere else, all of a sudden they start behaving differently, right? And so it has been taken over by tourists in Thailand, and that reputation, the stereotype about Thailand, really came from that. And I have to say that Thailand's done a lot since, in terms of law. There's lots of things happening in terms of also police training, and they have started pushing this problem to take it serious. And so we see many of those offenders that are now have moved over to Cambodia, to Laos, to Myanmar, in other places where it's kind of less serious, because in Thailand now, if you do something like this and they get you, you don't get a slap on the wrist anymore. They treat you like an actual offender. Okay, so this is the Ecpat office, the secretariat office of Ecpat International, right? Where we have the office in Thailand, in Bangkok, but then we have people around the world, and I think it's important that's an important strategic consideration for us. We don't want to be an international organization that flies into a country, tell them for a day what they're doing wrong, and then fly out again. So, but what we want to do is work with organizations like yours, with individuals like you, and kind of shape advocacy agendas, joint positions, really shape those with your knowledge, and then present them through you and through people from the same region, like Stana, right? So we have regional coordinators that are our glue between the membership and the secretariat, and Stana is obviously in charge of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. In that context, we have Isaline. If any one of you have been in contact with her, she's based in Belgium, right? And she's doing everything that's to do with the EU and members in the EU. Then we have Fabio, who is in Colombia. He's the regional coordinator for the Americas. He's Colombian himself. We have Willy Goloso, who is working out of Pretoria in South Africa, and is our contact on the regional coordinator for Africa. We have Lilian, who is based in Beirut in Lebanon, and is our regional coordinator for the Middle East and North Africa. We have Shrinka, which is for South Asia and working out of Nepal, right? We have Koi as regional coordinator of Eastern Asia and Southeast Asia. She's working out of our office. She's Thai. And then we have other different people, obviously, and COVID just made it so also that organizations are more decentralized now. And I think in our context, that's a good development. And so that's kind of a snapshot. That's not our members map, but the map of where Ecpat International has actual staff, right? And so we see that happening, that trend, just much more rapidly now. It's getting more difficult. I guess you probably have the same experience in terms of recruitment. People don't want to necessarily go to the office anymore. They don't want, excuse me, I think people want maybe not only work from home, because that comes with its own challenges, but I'm losing my voice here. And we really, thank you. We really want people come together. Some things we have also seen don't work in only virtual and only online environments. But people are much less likely to kind of leave their house, their communities, move to another country, and so on. So there comes with specific recruitment challenges. But I think it makes us stronger also, because we're becoming a truly global organization that is based in countries and in communities. So that really separates us from Save the Children, from World Vision, Plan International, from whoever has international offices and is decentralized in the sense that they have country offices. We are a membership organization, a global movement. That's how we refer to us. And that really goes with that kind of setup very well. Now, sexual exploitation. Next one, please. So I think looking and listening to you this morning, I think it was very encouraging, because you will see, and you know more than us about many of these things, because you work on it every day. But I just want to give you that encouragement that those areas that you mentioned, that are very central to your work, are indeed issues that are high on our agenda also, so that there's all kind of good room for collaboration, right? So early and forced marriage is something that we work on for many years. And I think it's very, very, that in particular, we know that sexual exploitation is part of this. We know that this overwhelmingly deals with girls. We know that in the context of humanitarian crisis, of war, political instability and whatnot, that problem is on the rise. And we also know that it's not good enough to go in and shame people about their culture or about whatever. That's their realities. And to go in there and say bad, bad, bad doesn't do the trick. You just have to take a step back and say, who are you? And so it's a difficult one. It's a tricky one to get it right in this one, right? And I think it has to come with a certain level of acknowledgement of culture, of traditions, and to point out that I don't think there's any culture in the world that endorses child exploitation. If you really look at it, but it's important that we make the right argument in this. We've done a lot of studies on that area, and when we did a regional overview for the MENA region not so long ago, that came out also as one of the top 3 areas that members wanted to work on. But with the migration aspects, with the increasing, I don't know how many armed conflicts we have at the moment in the world, you know, we just see this problem is on the rise, and we need to address it. So whoever's working on that, we could show of hands who's working on child early forced marriage. Yeah, I heard it a few times this morning. We're interested in collaborating, right? Next one. Prostitution, I mentioned it. I think we shouldn't even call it prostitution. This has nothing to do with prostitution, that is abuse, right? It's wrongly labeled as child prostitution. It's the same with the pornography, by the way, where it doesn't have to do anything with pornography, because when it involves children, it's sexual abuse and exploitation. When we speak about images that we find online that portray children being sexually abused, we refer to it as crime scene footage, as evidence of a crime scene, and not as pornography, right? And I think that's part of the story, how we can transform the narrative, how people look at it. So like, this has nothing to do with pornography, right? Okay, so, but it's happening, and it's happening in many, many places. Then we have the humanitarian context, what's going on the migration trail, what is going on in the camps, what is going on in long-term protracted refugee settings. Often we see that the only currency people really have on them, on that trail, is their own bodies, unfortunately. And many of them are children. And what happens in a camp like that, we can only guess. Right? And I think you're much closer in understanding that and seeing what's happening there. Ecpat is now in the last 2 years started really working on that particular context with much more attention. And so we are now commissioned studies in Ethiopia and Kenya, in Venezuela, but there's a very strong humanitarian context going on, and in the north of Iraq, in the Kurdish part of Iraq. And so we're starting to kind of, on that, what I mentioned, on that research end, right, to really look into this topic from different contextual settings and try to understand, so what needs to happen here, right? And also to bring together all the good work, all the experience that people like you have that work in these settings, and bring it to the fore. Because really one of the benefits I think that Ecpat International can bring is that we can help you tell your story. Your work is great, and it's great in your community, in your particular setting, but it can be so much greater if other people hear of it and can actually make use of your knowledge and can learn from it, can bring your experience and your success stories or what you observe to a different arena and maybe bring other stakeholders in that can help change. So that's really the purpose of this. So we're going, I wouldn't say on a global study on humanitarian context, but we will certainly approach this with much more rigor and much more attention in the coming years. And so who's working on this context here? Any one of you, show of hands? Yes, yes, yes. So, yeah, we are interested. We'll come your way. We'll see what we can do together, right? That's what I would like to leave you with in that sense. It's saying like, maybe we want to work on a case study. Help us understand how this problem manifests itself in your community, right? What's going on there? Can we tell that story for starters so that people understand this? Maybe something next one. Trafficking of children for sexual purposes is something that's very traditional to Ecpat's work. Depending on where you go in the world and look at the law, everything is, in the US, basically every child abuse is kind of labeled as trafficking. In other countries also, but it's also for us to get a better understanding, to see how does that overlap some of the migration, for example. Maybe in the online environment there's a lot of trafficking going on, where we're largely ignorant to it, right? So that's how there are websites that where you can get access to children. It's kind of almost like a dating platform, but it's dedicated to children, for people under 18 years old. But there's no laws that pick up on it, really, because the images that you see on these websites are not nude. They're perfectly normal pictures of these kids. And so it's not covered under trafficking laws, it's not covered under sexual abuse imagery or child pornography laws. And so there's so much work for us that would be critical for us to stand up and say, yeah, listen, there's something going wrong, but we need to understand it also first. So there's lots of work for us to be done. I mentioned this one here, that's kind of a typical scene that you might see if you've ever done holiday in Southeast Asia, but in many other parts of the world also. So I want to just maybe leave you, maybe you've seen something like this in Antalya. You know? It's certainly not a Thai problem. Certainly it's at the African coast, up and down, in Latin America, in Brazil, in Colombia, everywhere you can find that problem. I'm sure if you look close enough, you find it in Turkey. Right? And then online really changed everything, right? And I would argue that there's not a single form of abuse happening nowadays where technology doesn't play a role somewhere on the trajectory of that abuse, right? So, and that takes very different forms because technology is part of everything. We get up in the morning and the first thing we do is this, and the last thing we do is before we sleep, and in between we hold on to our devices, and children first and foremost are exactly the same. So if we travel, if we go to work, if we go out for dinner, whatever we do. Now I don't know how we survived so many years without this, but you know, now it doesn't work anymore. I remember growing up when we said like, okay, we meet at 8 o'clock at this place, then there was no more contact during the whole day, and at 8 o'clock in the evening we were all there. Now if you don't have your phone, you probably don't know and you will not reach there, or maybe you keep it free for yourself that until 10 to 8 you can say, oh, I'm 20 minutes late or whatever it is, right? So it's part of everything we do, and it's also part of abuse and exploitation. Giving children a mobile phone, so I have 2 boys at home, 12 and 16 years old. Yeah? My 12-year-old had his birthday this week, Tuesday. He turned 12 years old. And he was looking forward to this particular birthday because his older brother got his own first phone when he was 12. So he knew he was gonna, and it's a tough decision as a parent. It is. And I think the companies are leaving us alone, right? Because you give them a phone and then you have to trust God that everything goes well, right? It's not like that you can go put a button and press a button and say like, only content that is appropriate for a 12-year-old can be streamed to that phone, click and then give it to your son. No, you give him the whole world right there, right? And it comes with all the good things and all the opportunities. You cannot deprive them of it. You cannot not give them phones anymore because then they don't exist. They don't participate in life. School, everything is online now. But at the same time, lots of stuff can happen, right? You might think your kids, they sit up in their room and in your house and it's all good, and maybe it's not, right? Okay, so this particular image is a screenshot of a website on the dark web. A dark web child exploitation marketplace. That's maybe the best description of it. Where offenders, right, where you can only become part of this if you agree to terms of reference that say, do not upload porn content of people older than 15 years old, right? So it's from the entry point very clear what they're looking for, and to remain part of such a network, you will have to continue to upload abuse images of children so that you get access to abuse images of other children, right? And so for law enforcement to investigate such platforms is very, very difficult because I have, depending on how you're doing on time, okay. Yeah. I've because at the end of this show, but I don't know if we get there, I've put a few challenges out there that I think that really kind of we are grappling with in today's day and age as child rights organizations. And one of them is certainly that, because so for law enforcement to investigate a place like that, they have to infiltrate the places, covert operations where you basically take one guy out and take that person's place in their offender network, right? And so that you can investigate everyone in this network. It's not good enough to take one guy out and that's the other 300 continue their efforts. So you have to take the place of one person. And that means in order to continue your investigation, you now have to, what? Upload child sexual abuse imagery. Because otherwise the other people think like, who's that? It's not uploading stuff. That might be the law. So then the others walk away, they close the shop, open a new group, right? And that is very difficult for child rights organizations. Like, well, we adhere to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Children, which was unfortunately written before we knew the world is what it is today. And so we at Ecpat, we said like, yes, countries need laws that enable police to do that. It's very uncomfortable for us to push for that, but we don't see any other. It's the same way if we were to have a website on the dark web where we trade guns or where we trade drugs, then police would investigate the exact same way. They would come in as an arms dealer or as a drug dealer until they take the place down. And in this case, they have to come in as child sexual offenders. UNICEF said it's not okay with the CRC. We cannot push for these laws. Amnesty said it's against international human rights law. And we said, I think our international human rights frameworks need revision because they were written before each other, right? But we fully understand it's it's a difficult one, because what we want is we want to get rid of sexual abuse images on the web. Now, how that police work is done, we can spend another 2 days talking about it, but I know that the Australian police are market leaders in that sense, and they train police forces around the world. They have the laws in place that allow that. And if the Turkish police come across a place like this on the dark web, then their laws would not allow them to investigate it. So that what they would do would they would replace that one person and then move the whole investigation down to Australia for the Australian police to take over because they can under law. So it's fascinating. It's fascinating, but it's difficult. And it's for us to get our heads around and say, how do we deal with that? Right? Next one. Now, we have done a study in 2017, a few years now, but where we studied into the ICSID database. So the ICSID database is a database run by Interpol. And the ICSID database stands for International Child Sexual Exploitation Database. Yeah, and whenever someone finds an image online that depicts a child being sexually abused, they can report that picture. Say like, what is this, right? And then eventually that image would end up in Interpol's database. And they give it a hash value. They would give it a unique value, that image. So whenever that image pops up on the internet again, you can very quickly take it down. And also, if another police from another country comes across that image, they don't have to open an investigation immediately. They can go to Interpol and say, like, do you know that image? And Interpol runs it through their database. And then they say, oh yeah, that's an old image. The victim has already been identified and whatever, right? So you don't have to do anything about it. Ecpat was the only NGO that got access to that database. And we've researched into it, into offender profiles, victim profiles. And what we saw was that more than 60% of the victims in these thousands and thousands and thousands of images were prepubescent, so very young, between a toddler and maybe 11 years old. We saw that the younger the victims in those images, the more severe the forms of abuse that we saw. So the younger they are, the less they can report, the less they talk back, the easier they are to manipulate, and so on. So the Kopien scale here is a scale from the done by the University of Cork in Ireland, and it's a 10-scale list where you can categorize an image according to the severity of abuse that is. So 1 would be very suggestive, not explicit, but kind of wrong. And 10 obviously is the most severe forms of abuse that you can imagine or not imagine. But so if you see boys in those images, it was more likely that it would be labeled between 7 and 10. Girls between 4 and 6 can go back quickly, sorry. And the younger they are, the more severe the abuse also, right? And that really set us up in terms of that 1 in 3 images depicts boys. We were shocked because girls are still the vast majority of victims, but we thought ourselves, I don't know, maybe under 10% boys, but 30%, all right, in those images are boys. And that really kind of woke us up to the topic. That's when we started the Global Voice Initiative and said, like, hey, what's going on, right? And yeah, next one. Gaming, we can talk about it. I don't know who has children at home that game, and that usually comes, you play a game with, I don't know how many people that you don't know. There are 30 players in a game. It's all online games. And who are these? You don't know. They immediately connected through a chat where they all can talk, where they can have one-on-one chats also, and so on, but really kind of a grooming paradise for people, right? So there's lots of work to be done in that. We have started an initiative on gaming. We've done a first position paper. We organized a meeting in London half a year ago, and we will continue to push that topic forward. And we eventually go to the gaming companies, and it's more even the chat platforms, right? So that are connected to the games, because the games, even though they're very violent, they don't usually promote or don't promote sexual exploitation, but the inbuilt chat or the kind of chat application that the kids use so that they can connect with others, that's where usually stuff happens. Next one. Sama? Next one, please. So,
It's almost different boys. Sorry.
What I wanted to say on higher voice. All right, so maybe here we go, voice. Go on back.
Yes, it is.
So